Preksha, we are ready.
Thank you. Thanks.
Deepak sir, good morning, Abhijit. And
good morning, Abhijit. Good morning. Good morning to all of you. I think, yeah.
Good morning to all the participants, and Amrit, thanks a lot.
Good morning. Good morning, Abhijit.
Shall we begin? Good afternoon and welcome back to day 3 of the 14th All India Conference of China Studies, organized by the Institute of Chinese Studies and China Bhavan, Vishwabharati University, in partnership with Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. The theme of this panel is Social Practices and Cultural Dimensions, and we're very glad to have with us Professor B.R. Deepak, Professor of Chinese and China Studies at the Center of Chinese and Southeast Asian Studies, JNU, as chair for this session. The theme of this, Professor Deepak has been a visiting fellow at the University of Edinburgh and at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, Beijing. He is also a recipient of many scholarships and awards, including the prestigious Nehru and Asia Fellowship and the India-China Cultural Exchange Fellowship for his doctoral and advanced studies in the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences and Peking University. He is also the author of many books, including his recent title, India and China, Beyond the Binary of Friendship and Enmity, published in 2021. To lead the discussion, we have with us Professor Amrit Sen, Professor and former Head of Department at the Department of English, Vishwabharati University. Interested in 18th century studies, travel writing, Tagore studies, and history of science, Professor Sen has won the Outstanding Thesis Award by the Government of India and a host of other academic recognitions. Professor Sen is currently the joint editor of the Vishwabharati Quarterly and the director of the publication wing of the Vishwabharati. The speakers in this panel are Mr. Subham Dutraj, PhD candidate at Sikkim University. Is titled Confucianism in Application, Tracing the Evolution of Confucian Ideals and its Practical Implications in Contemporary Chinese Society. The participant Shal, PhD candidate and guest faculty, China Bhavan, Vishwabharati University, Shantiniketan. He is presenting a paper titled Voice of Netizens, Understanding China. Our next participant is Mr. Nishit Kumar, PhD candidate. This is titled More Years, China's Cultural Capital, Why and How. Our final speaker is Madhurendra Jha, Assistant Professor at the Department of Chinese Studies, Doon University, Doon, presenting a paper titled Involution or Alienation, Visiting the Issue Through Jia Chai's Hometown Trilogy. Before I invite Professor Deepak to begin proceedings, let me remind the participants that except for this, all participants shall remain muted for the duration of the event. Participants are requested to send in their queries via the chat box, the reset option. Please unmute yourself only when called upon. So I will now invite Professor D to kindly begin the proceedings.
Yeah, thank you.
Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Preksha. I hope you can hear me.
Sir.
Yeah, great for doing half the job for me. Thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all for this panel entitled Social Practices and Cultural Dimensions of the 14th All India Conference of China Studies. I'm happy to note that the special theme of this conference has been society and culture in China, one of the most important areas to understand China. In yesterday's keynote address, Ambassador Shivshankar Menon rightly pointed out that China's domestic dynamics have been responsible for its external behavior. Some of these, namely Confucianism, internet discourse, literature, and cinema, would be deliberated on by the upcoming scholarship, many of whom are our students in this panel. As far as Confucianism, the party state has used and abused it in history, and Xi Jinping appears to have made it fundamental to his philosophical foundations in the new era, attempting to legitimize socialist core values, which he has propounded through the core values of Chinese civilization, where Confucius is the embodiment of the same. In the same way, internet discourse in China is an area that has been neglected in India, perhaps for the lack of expertise in Chinese language. The kind of concept words that have appeared on the internet mirrors the kind of churning that is going on in Chinese society presently. Right from things who of the reform era, 内卷、996、躺平主义、铁帽子王, etc. These are the new concept word which speaks volume about whether it is corruption, whether it is the mentality of the Chinese millennial in the society. Interestingly, the philosophy, literature, and cinema are also being used by the party state to expand China's soft power beyond its borders. But here again, the domestic drivers have had a huge impact on these. Mo Yan, who at the time of winning the Nobel Prize supported censorship, or we can also say this once a year, in one way or another. But I think some of the panelists who are talking about Mo Yan's literary capital or cultural capital, he has been kept out of 中国百年文学的红色基因, or if in English I translate it, the red gene of Chinese literature in a century. This is a list compiled by the Guangming Rebao on the first, you can say, centenary of the Chinese on July 1st, 2021. Because it is generally believed that his writing portrays China in a bad light, and that he doesn't fall in the category of 红色作家 or the so-called red writer. We have seen how Liyunti, one pianist in China, has been used and abused recently. I believe the second resolution, though it is the third resolution on certain questions of history, but I'm referring to the resolution of 1981, paved the way for controlled literary freedom in China. However, with increased censorship and controlling the narrative, the same has been reflected in the kinds of cinema that is being produced in China recently. The Wolf Warrior 1 and 2 and more recent Changqinghu Battle campaign are some of the examples. In the light of these developments, I hope the presenters, they will reflect upon these issues, and I hope most of them, they have consulted Chinese sources during the presentation, and maybe some of those who wish to take up these issues later in their maybe published writing, so and so forth. And I think with these remarks, let me invite the first speaker of the session, Mr. Subham Dutraj. Dutraj, over to you. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Let me just a very good afternoon to all, respected chair, all distinguished scholars, and my co-panelists. Thanking to AICCS. I am Subham Dutraj from Department of Chinese, Sikkim University. As a part of my research interest, I am looking in the intellectual history of pre-modern China, which drew my attention to the topic, Confucianism in application, retracing the evolution of Confucian ideals and its practical implementation in contemporary Chinese society. So the main proposition of this study is Confucianism is not static, orthodox, ancient school of philosophy, but rather a dynamic system of thought which has evolved from the ancient to the present times. From the warring state period through the Han, Yuan, Ming, and Qing times, the Republican era, and finally into the communist period of contemporary times, Confucian ideals have been reinterpreted and its principal teaching reapplied to the changing socio-cultural, political reality of China. The research paper here plans to map the evolution of Confucianism both as a system of thought and the way of life of Chinese people, and study its application in contemporary Chinese society and polity. The study here employs the historical research method of external criticism and internal criticism of textual sources. Tools for research here includes both primary pertaining sources pertaining to the set of Confucian classics as contained within the 4 books and 5 classics, and secondary sources comprising of academic research papers, books, documents directly or indirectly related to the areas of research investigation. Beginning with the discussion, Confucianism served as one of the Confucianism in modern Chinese, viewed by modern Chinese intellectuals from 1919 to 1949. Confucianism served as one of the most dominant political philosophy throughout the 3 millennia long imperial Chinese history, having served as the official state ideology and having laid the theoretical foundation for an ethical society based upon harmonious social relation with the individual as the center of the and the cosmos as the furthermost extension of it, governed by principle of benevolence, run, righteousness, e, property, li, consciousness, chung, and altruism, shu. With the beginning of the century of national humiliation, 1840s to 1940s, Confucianism was criticized by most of the intellectuals of the May 4th movement, that is 1919, as having been root cause of China's descendant feudal tendencies and her ever-yielding attitude towards Western imperialist aggressive forces. Counter narratives and rise of new Confucianism. Some other members of the Chinese intelligentsia from the post-May 4th period, however, maintained unconscious continues with the Confucian tradition at almost every level of life, behavior, attitude, belief, and commitment. Advocates of new philosophical movement called New Confucianism, that is Xinruchia, continued to think from the Confucian roots. For instance, Xiongshili's ontological reflection, Liang Shuming's cultural analysis, Feng Youlan's reconstruction of the learning of the principle, Herlin's new interpretation of the learning of the mind, Tang Chunji's philosophy of culture, Xu Fu Kuan's social criticism, and Mo Changsan's moral metaphysics continued to justify the need to relook into the Confucian legacy and its influence upon the existing Chinese mindset and physics. Now, conflict of ideologies, a search of balance. Mao Zedong-led CPC regime continued to link Confucianism with China's perennial weakness and feudal hierarchical mindset. Conflict of ideologies have all along existed within the support of New Confucianism and the CPC's chief advocates, owing to the former adherence to the concept of Chong Rufanma, that is, praise the Confucian way and oppose the Marxist path, while promoting Shang Chan Li, Luo Hou Lun, productive backwardness, and Chung Kuo The Shu, She Hui Jie Kou Lun, that is, a theory of special Chinese societal structure, and the latter adherence to the strong Marxist spirit of doing away with semi-feudal and semi-colonial ideological mindset and tendencies. And the practical aspects of Confucianism application in redefining gender roles, work ethics, and social equation in China from 1978 to 2000. With the beginning of the reform and opening up period from 1978, there was a resurgence of Confucianism in China. Post-Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, that is 1976 onwards, a renewed interest in Confucianism reflected the need of Chinese masses to address the issue of moral, psychological, and intellectual vacuum against the backdrop of receding Marxist nationalism. Confucianism in theory started to be reinterpreted and applied differently in mainland contemporary China to counter the surging influence of modernization, globalization, and westernization and values associated with them. Practical aspect of Confucianism. With the collapse of Eastern European communism in 1989, it became more obvious for the Chinese that Marxism and Leninism and the thought of Mao Zedong was gradually fading away and was failing to function as a persuasive ideology or belief system. People's interest in traditional culture heritage rose steadily during 1980s and 1990s. Confucianism re-emerged in China, first in the form of Kuo the fashion of sinology study, and Tu Ching Yuntung, the reading classics movement. The practical aspects of Confucianism in social trends. Tu Weiming most strongly argues in favor of considering Confucianism as a living tradition. In contemporary China, Western ideals of individualism and personal freedom of choice have not been able to completely influence the mindset of people despite waves of globalization, family remains at the core of the Chinese societal structure, and the virtue of filial piety exhibits itself in the loving care of one's elderly parents. Uh, Practical aspects of Confucianism in corporate culture. The revival of Confucian spirit is also visible within the functioning of the prevalent corporate service in contemporary China. The most widely used executive coaching system introduces a technique which blends traditional Confucian values and Western corporate methods. Eva Wong, the founder, puts it thus: Confucianism is in our blood. Social scientists analyze the refurbishing of Confucian idols within the fabric of contemporary corporate culture as a means to ensure worker loyalty, promote economic productivity, and emphasizes corporate responsibility. In order to enhance the team coins and work ethics, many companies inclined to frame and forge their enterprise culture with Confucianism, and some bosses even spare a fixed interval from the working hours for their employees to recite Confucian classics. All levels of Chinese government has been appropriating Confucianism. This has been done for the sake of elevating contemporary Chinese spiritual civilization as official announced, or inspiring Chinese patriotism as otherwise believed, or pacifying swelling popular discontentment with the regime as suspected by many. Revival of Confucianism by the CPC government, that is Hu Jintao intervention. President Hu Jintao's key slogan, Kuo-Chien He-Xie Shi-Hui, or to build the harmonious society, can be seen as a conscious evocation of the old sages Yanhui, Zhangzi, Zisi, emphasis on the value of harmony and balance. In 2004, the concept of harmonious society as a socio-economic vision was formally announced by President Hu Jintao and was officially endorsed by the CPC. Social harmony and the key value of ancient Confucianism, which was formerly believed to stand in contradiction to the communist principle of class struggle, was found to be close alliance with the socialist goal of equality in position, status, enjoyment of rights. Confucianism in the same year, as ambitious program to set up Confucius Institute around the world was initiated by non-profit organization under the scholarship of the Chinese government. The mission of Confucius Institute is to promote and enhance the learning of Chinese language and to understanding of Chinese culture. By the end of 2016, there were 502 Confucius Institute in more than 140 countries. Confucianism was thus being promoted as a tool of soft power diplomacy by President Hu Jintao. Xi Jinping's soft power diplomatic tactic through his China Dream project. President Xi Jinping advocates the use of Confucianism through a modernized approach that would help to fit the values of morality and a common future of the Chinese governance at the center stage of globalization and modernity. By reviving Confucius, they are making the case that the China has its own political culture based on its own political and philosophical history. President Xi Jinping found to have embraced Confucius' basic teachings, advocating a patriarchal social hierarchy, to argue that the party should command obedience because it represents core values reaching back thousands of years. He who rules the virtue is like a North Star, he said at the meeting of officials last year, quoting Confucius. It maintains its place and the multitude of stars pay homage. In May 2014, the overseas edition of the state-run newspaper People's Daily published a selection of 76 of Xi's quotes from Chinese ancients, most often Confucius and Mencius, but also relatively obscure work that suggest a deeper knowledge of the classics, and they have come back to the Confucius for many of the same reasons.
Shubham, your time is up. Can you please wrap it up with a minute? You have overshot your time.
Yes. Through the major observation and the findings, the study reconfirms and that Confucianism through centuries have traveled out the classical text and entered into the everyday lives of the common people, reorienting its fundamental principle in order to survive within the emerging trends of modernization and globalization in contemporary China. The resurgence of Confucianism in the past 2 decades is a significant marker in understanding Chinese current polity theory and practice. Nevertheless, Confucianism itself needs to accommodate itself to the demand of the modern world if it is to be viable and sustainable amongst contemporary Chinese society. The article here finally has argued that despite the immense difficulty of finding its revived voice in contemporary China, integration of the religious and political dimension of Confucianism in mainstream Chinese social, political, and intellectual culture remains the primary idol that fuels and unites this intellectual of the present time in mainland and overseas China. Thank you. These are my select bibliography, Chinese sources and English sources. Thank you.
Thank you, Shubham. I know it is not easy to wrap up, the entire history of Confucianism from its origin all up to now in just 10 minutes.
Yes, sir.
May I now have the pleasure to invite our next speaker, Shubhendu Ghoshal. I request all the speakers to take note of the time. Shubhendu, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, ICS, for providing us the opportunity to present a paper in front of such distinguished scholars. Very good afternoon to all of you, and very good afternoon to all the co-panelists and the participants who are present over here. So, in my paper, please let me know if my screen is visible to all of you. I hope that my screen is visible.
Yes, it is. Go ahead.
Yeah. So in my paper, I'll be talking about. Just give me 1 second. Yeah. So the title of my paper is "The Voice of Netizens: Understanding China in New Era." This paper actually deals with the words and the vocabs that the Chinese netizens use online to communicate among themselves, and also to address different issues in China or outside China. So with this vocabs are not, you will not find these vocabularies in conventional Chinese dictionaries, but they are very much in popular use. So as for the data is of the CNNIC, these are data which shows that almost 65% of China's population are accessing internet, and the most important part of is that 99% of almost the internet users are accessing internet through mobile phones, which is a very significant in terms of using of these vocabs which are in popular use in China. So this is a picture which is very common in China, nowadays in India as well, in metros, right? You see people are looking at screens, and this terminology has came into play, Titotsu, which talks about people who are phone addicted, screen addicted people, always into screens, right? So, which I'll talk about the activities of Chinese netizens, what are the platforms they use for their activities online. And these are some major platforms that they have been using, are in popular use in China. And this is a data which actually talks about the age distributions of the internet users, from which you can see from the age group of 20 to 49, it covers almost 60% of total China's internet users, which is actually a very large number. And why I'm talking about this, because this is the age group which deals directly with the society, survive under the pressure or under the system of the society. So this age group is very important. They are the major user of these social platforms which are in popular use in China. And this is a data which shows how many hours the Chinese spends. It's almost 38 hours a week, which counts to like more than 5 hours a day. And because of the constraint of time, I'm moving my slide faster so that I can come to the point directly. So what is voice of netizens? As I've told earlier, I've said earlier, it refers to words and phrases and all numerical that are being used Chinese netizens while being actively online interaction, various social media platforms and online community. It depicts a hybrid form which is comprised of mixed character, alphabetic signs, emojis, and other visual graphic means, right? So these are the examples which I can give. Mei is a combination of the Chinese word Tai. Now you can find this word in Pleco or any other digital dictionary, which actually originally it was meant as palm, but the Chinese netizens have started widely using it to describe as someone which is very stupid. If you see the character, it comprises of two characters, which is Tai. In Tai, in Chinese, you got the meaning as dull. So with two Tai coming together, it gives a meaning of 很呆 的意思. So someone who is very dull on things. Next, the number which I was talking about, which is 748. It's a numerical combination that the Chinese are using in the chat box to define the thing which we say in English as go to hell or 去死吧. Right? In Chinese, the pronunciation of 去死吧 is something similar, somewhere similar to the Chinese pronunciation of 748, which is 七死吧. And this word mm is actually the abbreviation of the Chinese word mei, which actually doesn't define the meaning of younger sister, but rather defines the meaning of a beautiful girl. And as we all know, the last word you all might be very much aware of, which is Umauchen. It's actually the 50 cents army. It defines the people who are famous at posting favorable comments of Chinese government online. So they are called by the netizens as Umauchen. Sorry. So what are the characteristics? These are some of the characteristics of these words which are being coined by the netizens to carry out online interaction. These newly coined words and expression which sometimes definitely create new meaning for the existing words with new meaning adapted by a fixed circle of people, especially while using social media. I'll not go into the details. You can see it on the screen. And the words like Yizu, which is ant tribe, and Fang Nu, which are online coined word, which rather then in the later period got enlisted in conventional Chinese dictionary, especially the digital ones, which defines ant tribe, the people, the fresh college graduate students who are striving hard to survive in big cities. They have big dreams, but they cannot afford their big dreams in big cities because of high expenses. And similarly, the Fang Nu is also defines young Chinese men or women who have just joined the job and are struggling with a lot of bank loans. So these are the words which are being used online to describe those people. And these words emerge to refer new things, express new ideas, construct new identities, and construct a flux of cultural development and social changes through the continuous evolution of knowledge in a very creative way. Why I have said this creative in inverted comma, I'll tell you later in later slides. So what are the factors which are behind this creation of these words? One factor is it's a digital outburst of human emotion. The second one is influence of socio-political factors. And the third one is definitely digital monitoring and censorship. As we all know, China has a very strict and censored on the third point I have something, I have some observations. That is, this censorship is also being can be labeled as censorship with Chinese characteristic. Why I'm giving this argument? I have evidence to show. I'll definitely show in the later part of my slides. So moving forward, I'll show some words and phrases which depicts the creativity of the Chinese netizens, which I just talked. You just see this word "chan chan tian." It actually a word which went viral in Chinese social media in 2014, which was actually a commemorative year of 25th anniversary of the Tiananmen massacre. And this word actually depicts this picture, which is very famous. You can find it online. And you can see the character Chan, both the Chan, it shapes something similar to tanks, right? And this last character, which is Tien, with the fire radical below, it depicts the tanks crushing the student, which actually happened in Tiananmen. So this is the way the netizens try to depict their opinion online about the Tiananmen, because of that, because of the 25th anniversary of Tiananmen, Chinese government was very much, the censorship was very strict online, and this is one of the words which was taken down within one day after coming online. And the second word, I think all of you know, Nomadland. It's a movie that won Oscars this year, Academy Awards. It was filmed by famous Chinese director who is now in the US, definitely, is Chao Ting. So she, her Academy Awards winning incident was not broadcasted in China, and all the materials, promotion materials and everything, any news regarding this nomad land, which the Chinese name is Ui Chiriti, was censored because of one of her comments which she made in 2013, where she said there are lies everywhere in China, which the Chinese government definitely didn't take positively, and everything, all the materials related to her movies were censored. But the Chinese netizens felt very proud of a Chinese lady, a Chinese person, especially a female, winning an Oscar for the best director. They started a hashtag to celebrate Chow's win. And this is one of the keyword hashtags which actually was viral in Chinese social media, where they have changed the Chinese of E with the romanization form of E, which is Ui Triti, rather, because the censorship is carried out by systems which take down keywords. So they have created a kind of formula to deceive that function, that machine, how it works. And the height one is the best one I found is this one. You can see there are numbers 0, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There is no one into it. So it's, as per the Chinese interpretation, one is E. So there is no one into these serials number. It defines Ui, Triti, a place without one. So this is one of the hashtags that went viral. These are two measures which went viral in China to celebrate Chow Oscar win. And another thing is that this is one of those three character classics of Ren Chu, Xing Ban San, which actually translated in English is people at birth are inherently good, which Chow said in her acceptance speech. And people started celebrating her win with this line of hashtag, and the Chinese government immediately took it down. And how the Chinese netizens reacted to it, they came up with the second verse of this, the second part of this verse, which is called Xing Xiang Jin and Xi Xiang Yuan, which means their nature are similar, but their habits make them different. This is a verse which has been taught in Chinese primary education system. It's a very well-known verse. But the point of me being saying this, they have created a very creative way. They have used a very creative way of poking fun on the censorship. This is a screenshot of the tweet that was done by one of those Chinese netizens, because Weibo screenshots are
Shubhendu, you also have to wrap it up in a minute because your time is up here. Yeah.
Okay. So they have changed his Sheik, the character, by 404. And the next one is Sui. This character, if you see, the meaning of this character is green jade, which actually means nothing, but if you see this character, it comprises of two parts. It's she, and the next part is Su, which means die. So this is a hashtag which was floated in China in that period of time, which actually depicts the meaning of dying of Xi Jinping. People were praying during the initial outbreak of Wuhan. People are very much dissatisfied with Xi Jinping not coming into public domain. And this word is, as you can see, it is very highly sensitive word, but this word was run viral by the Chinese netizens. Moving back to the next slide, I have selected 10 buzzwords which are in popular use in China, or were in popular use in China. It's Ni Xing Che is actually defining to people of the frontline workers who have fought the war against the pandemic from the beginning. And there's another word, Nei Chuan. It talks about in a competition, the Chinese have to go through after in their study academic life, both in their work life. And the third one is Waswan La. It actually talks about a Chinese person feeling jealous of seeing someone in a very good position with a lot of money and a beautiful partner in their life. And the next one, as you all know, Chiu Chiu Liu, it's a 9 to 9 6 work culture that they have been mocked, which has been mocked in China by the netizens. And the next slide, which talks about Sanping. This is one of those words which I think there is a Chinese word in which called sharpie, which means dull, and it's a slang. But the netizens were using this, and it was banned by the Chinese authority. But netizens were quick to found out this word as sanping, which is a homophone, somewhere homophone to the Chinese word sharpie, and it was taken down and by the Chinese authority within a very 1 or 2 days, because sanping, they have said that sanping defines the paratroopers, which shouldn't be defamed like this. And the next one is F4, which is originally referred to Chinese bands, which are feminine looking 4 men, but in Chinese netizens, they have used this word to define 4 people who are the governor of Hubei, the secretary of provincial party, the secretary of the provincial party committee of Wuhan, and mayor of Wuhan, and the secretary of municipality committee of Wuhan, to define being them responsible for the pandemic, the outbreak of the pandemic. And this one, as I said earlier, that the censorship with Chinese characteristic, you can see Global Times, a state affiliated mouthpiece, which actually didn't censor this word, which was defined by the Chinese, which are used by the Chinese.
You have overshot 4 minutes, please wrap it up. Otherwise,
yeah,
sure.
This is sorry. So this is to mock the Chinese American President Donald Trump, and with these are another words which you see: Thang Ping, lying flat, is the Chinese opposition of protesting the immense pressure. And the next one is Fana Risai, which is talks about people showing off their wealth and their fascination for branded things online. So I'm really sorry for, and this is the conclusion. There are a lot of things which need to be researched, and it's a huge potential of researching these words, which can approve, which can actually improve our understanding of the Chinese society in a better manner. Thank you, Chair. I'm really sorry for overlapping my time. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Shubhandu. In fact, you overshot by 5 minutes, so it would be injustice, to others if they are forced to wrap up within 10 minutes. So I request once again all the panelists that please, abide by the rules of the time, because we should have some considerable time for Q&A at the end of your presentation. So may I request now Nishit to make your presentation?
Thank you so much, sir. And good afternoon to everyone. I hope I'm audible. First of all, I want to thank organizers of 14th AICCS for giving this opportunity to present my paper in front of you all. The topic of my today's presentation, as you can see on the screen, I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, it's visible.
Thank you. So my topic is Moyen as China's cultural capital, why and how. It is well known that in the last few decades, China has been increasingly interested in using soft power as one of the components of its diplomatic efforts. In 2012, Moyen was awarded the Literature Nobel. As was to be expected, the Chinese government and the people celebrated this as a long overdue honor for Chinese literature. Though this award to Moyen brought its own share of controversies both at home and abroad, this seemed like a perfect opportunity for the Chinese state to use this achievement for enhancement of its image. In this context, this paper is trying to explore that, whether or not Moyen could be successfully used by China as cultural capital, and if so, to what extent. My paper is divided into 4 parts. The first one talks about China and the Nobel Prize. Second talks about Moyen and his works. And the third part deals about Nobel Prize in Literature in 2012. And then I conclude. So China and the Nobel Prize. Since China joined the world community after the Cultural Revolution, besides other international contests in different fields, the Nobel Prize in Literature has been viewed as a measure of success by Chinese writers, academicians, critics, and government itself. Chinese literary critics had complained that some of the greatest writers of the world, such as Leo Tolstoy, Maxim Gorky, Lu Xun, were never honored with the Nobel Prize. And this displeasure of Chinese people and the government increased after an African writer, Volsoinka, was awarded the prize. Since then, many intellectuals have felt that China had a bigger claim amongst the third world countries and that a Chinese writer should have received a Nobel Prize. In 2007, Chinese President Hu Jintao told the 17th Congress of the Chinese Communist Party that they need to invest more in their soft power. And this has been continued by the current president Xi Jinping. Theoretically speaking, award of the Nobel Prize to Mo Yan adds into the soft power of China and could be actively used by the Chinese state for soft power projection abroad. Mo Yan and his works. In the early years of his career, Mo Yan followed the literary trends and framework well established in post-Mao China, which is evident in his early works. With passing of time, he started experimenting with new techniques, and his hallmark of his writing is that he combined written literary style with popular oral traditions to address contemporary social issues. Mo Yan introduced readers to rural China through numerous characters in Re Shorgum. The portrait of rural society depicted in this novel was of people living at the height of anarchy with no governance, and villages had been left to fend for itself. In the novel Frog, Mo Yan deconstructed the China's official narrative of the one-child policy and presented a new unofficial and local narrative along with a long-standing traditional misogyny, which existed in the local party officials and peasants. In his work, the Gaelic Ballads, which were based on a real political event in China, was banned as soon as it was published. It shows a rural Chinese world in which love and fortune fall victim to corruption. On his work, Life and Death Are Wearing Me Out, Mo Yan himself said, quote, explores modern Chinese society's most critical issues, describing a series of tragedies associated with land, unquote. So from this, it can be argued that he is critical in evaluating and presenting political and social issues of China. Apart from all this criticism, he had received several literature awards inside China and outside China, even before the Nobel Prize. He was the recipient of Liberation Army Literature Award, Beijing Literature Award, Fourth National Best Novel Award, Taiwan Union Daily Novel Award. His works were first included in top 100 Chinese novels of 20th century in 2000. The Laurel Battalion Award in France, Fangmu Literature Award, First Ting Chu Literature Award, Mathai Cup for short stories. He was also awarded by France as the Ordre des Arts et des Lettres. And his works has been also awarded in Italy, Japan, Vietnam. He has been nominated for Newest Award, which is considered as America's Nobel Prize. And he also won the first Newman Prize for Chinese literature. These national and international awards helped Mo Yan to grow as a writer in China. At the same time, it helped him to propagate and disseminate Chinese culture beyond national boundaries. 2012 Nobel Prize in Literature. So Mo Yan's work had already reached to a large world audience before he was awarded the Nobel Prize. So when he was awarded, writers, academicians, activists, readers, netizens from within and outside China were divided in their views on his award. While many congratulated Mo Yan, others felt his award was a mistake. Academicians, especially sinologists such as Nicky Herman, Michael Hawkes, Sabina Knight, Charles Locklane, hailed Mo Yan's win as positive news. However, experts and academicians such as Perry Link and Anna Soon questioned Mo Yan's political stance and language ability. Well-known writers such as Nobel laureate Herta Müller, Salman Rushdie also criticized Mo Yan's political stance. A Chinese satirist, Wang Xiaohong, tweeted her worry for the deceased Mr. Nobel, that was Liu Xiaopo, she imagined as a squirming in his grave. His tweet was, 2 years ago, people gave a prize to a Chinese and in doing so offended the Chinese government. Today they gave another prize to a Chinese and in doing so offended the Chinese people. My goodness, the whole of China offended in just 2 years. So by taking a closer look at the comments that appeared in the media as the immediate responses, it seemed that some activists and writers looked at this prize with political motivation and disagreed with his award, while others welcomed the decision. Most of the academicians involved in teaching Chinese literature saw his award as a watershed moment in the history of Chinese literature. Sabina Knight analyzed Mo Yan's political stand in her work, The Real Politic of Mo Yan's Fiction, and explains Mo Yan has flourished himself in a gray zone, meaning a delicately negotiated space where the government experiences unorthodoxy as long as writers camouflage their dissent in fictional allegory. On the other hand, responses from the Chinese state and Communist Party of China to Mo Yan's award was uniformly celebratory in the immediate aftermath. Li Changchun, then member of CPC and therefore a representative of the leadership, called it as not only an embodiment of the flourishing progress of Chinese literature, but also an embodiment of the continuing rise in the overall strength of our state and its international influence. The official newspaper of the Chinese Communist Party, the People's Daily, reported online, quote, Congratulations to Moyen for winning the Nobel Prize in Literature. It is the first time for a writer of Chinese nationality to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. Today is the day that Chinese writers have waited for too long and the Chinese people have waited for too long. Unquote. Within a week, Chinese officials announced to Moyen's village would be transformed into a Moyen culture experience zone. This was experienced in the immediate aftermath. So what happened after post-Nobel? Moyen has maintained that the Nobel Prize is a blessing and curse at the same time. He was nominated as a delegate to annual Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference in 2013, from which he has stepped down later in 2018. Notably, he didn't write again until 2018. In 2018, he published 3 novels. After the Nobel Prize, Moyen's works started getting translated into more languages. In Hindi, first short story was translated by Professor Puspesh Pant, and then there is a project going on under Professor Deepak, and in which Tanvi Negi translated Life and Death Wearing Me Out. Then another work was translated into Arabic by Hussein Fahmi. There was different kind of events organized by Croatian translator of Moyen's novel on a special reading session to read his novels to the audience. In Serbia, a symposium on Moyen was jointly organized by the Confucian Institute. Thus, literary translation and exchange promoted by publishing houses, Confucius institutes, and local mainstream media is a cyclic phenomenon of cultural promotion in different parts of the world. The Confucius Institute played a role of medium, but also built a platform for communication and exchange. On contrary to these, few months later in 2013, after his Nobel Prize, the set of the TV series Red Sorghum was vandalized and destroyed by the Santung government officials, and according to the reported news, it is related to the different perception on realism put forward by Moyen and President Xi Jinping. However, Moyen's Nobel Award could be read with the China's Ministry of Culture's 11th five-year plan for cultural construction, the Chinese culture going global strategy, So Chu Xu, which required support from various domestic departments and academia, embraced Moyen's Nobel Prize for its purpose. However, Moyen's work have never been uniformly embraced or received affirmation in China. One view is that Moyen's work is unique, and it is a major breakthrough in the intellectual discourse of enlightenment in the new literary tradition since the May 4th movement. After his Nobel, there was a survey conducted by Chinese online platform Weibo that asked whether his works can be used as compulsory education materials. The results showed that 89.7% of readers believe Moyen's writing is unfavorable for a school. In December 2018, Radio Free Asia reported that authorities had arrested Ghereth Abdurrahman, the deputy head of the linguistic department of the Academy of Social Sciences of Xinjiang, for his translation of a Moyen's novel. In popular culture, initially, Moyen was seen as a perfect candidate to enhance cultural capital of China, as he was the first Chinese citizen to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. However, contrasting views also emerged as he was also painted as a writer who writes bad things about China to gain popularity in the West. So now I reach to the part of my conclusion. In conclusion, to understand the use of Moyen's novel as a symbol of soft power or cultural capital of China, it is necessary to see future reception in the long term. Although Moyen's Nobel Award satisfied and ended the novel complex of China, his recognition is somewhat in the line with Cao Xingqian's novel, with one difference. Cao Xingqian is a dissident living in France and criticizing party directly, while Moyen voices social issues and gives a new narrative, which is not in the line with party ideology. This brings an anxiety within the state as to whether or not his works can be used as a cultural projection of China and critical of Chinese political system at different points. China's central censorship organ issued a directive to media companies instructing them to strictly police online discussion for anti-party charter or mention of 2 other Chinese-born Nobel winners. The directive reads, in translation, quote, to all websites nationwide, in light of Moyen winning the Nobel Prize for Literature, monitoring of microblogs, forums, blogs, and similar key points must be strengthened. Be firm in removing all comments which disgrace the party and the government, defame cultural work, and mention Nobel laureates. Without exception, block users if their writing contains malicious details, unquote. Moyen was awarded in 2012. Chinese government would have used it to their purpose by now if they had such an intention. Since 9 years have passed, it does not seem that they will use it to increase their soft power. and rightly mentioned by Professor Deepak, that Moyen has not been included as a red writers in 2021. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nishit, for wrapping up within the time limit. Now, may I invite our last speaker of the panel, Madhurendra Jha. Madhurendra, over to you. Yeah, Madhurendra, you can start.
Yes, a very good afternoon. I would like to confirm, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
And is my PPT visible?
PPT is visible.
Okay, okay. So a very good afternoon to all of you, and thank you for providing me this wonderful opportunity. So as you can see, the topic of my presentation is Involution or Alienation, visiting the issue through Chia Chang Ke's hometown trilogy. So Yao Wen Chiao-tse listed Neichuan, or which is now popularly known as involution, as one of the top 10 buzzwords in China in the year 2020. Another word which found itself on the list is Takungren, which simply put means working people. However, in the year 2020, the semantic of Takungren changed from it being an expression for migrant workers or for those who engage in blue-collar jobs to also include the white-collar salaried class of China. While there are 8 more buzzwords on the list, these 2 are directly related to the journey of economic reforms China embarked upon in the year 1978, which ushered her into an era of market economy, albeit with the so-called Chinese characteristics. Among these 2 terms, it is involution, which seems to have generated a lot of curiosity and conversation among China watchers, commentators, and media. The argument is further strengthened by the data which indicates that on Weibo, the cumulative number of views on various topics related to involution has exceeded 1 billion. However, just the way Takungren has come to gain a new connotation, Neichuan or involution too has seen a change in its meaning. So through my paper, I'm going to argue that this new sociological phenomenon of involution is not at all a new phenomenon. In fact, if we approach it through the theories of alienation and if we critically analyze the works of Chia Chang Ke, a Chinese auteur of the 6th generation, we may find that involution is in fact old wine in a new bottle, and it is alienation. However, it is important to understand that how was involution understood in China before it became a buzzword. So we can see that involution was understood as an academic concept. The concept of involution referred to the anthropological meaning given by the American anthropologist Alexander A. Goldenweiser. It was, which was later used by Clifford Geertz in 1965. And in China, it was introduced by Philip C.C. Huang in 1985 to understand the socio-economic involution of China, especially agriculture in the earlier Qing era. And later it was used by Prasenjit Dwara to put forth the theory of state involution, again in the context of China. So it will be safe to say that involution in China had been used as an academic concept to convey the complexities of a system, economic or political or social or cultural, and to mark a sense of growth without development. Now, cut to the year 2020, and involution has taken a great leap forward, and from being an academic highbrow concept, it has gone to become a lexicon of the masses, although with a change in its essence. It is being used to convey a subjective feeling of a psychological tiredness in the ever-intensifying competition to survive in today's China, where state capitalism has resulted into the proliferation of materialism, consumerism, and commodity fetishism in what can be termed as the mass society of China. Anthropologist Xiangpiao explains the genesis of involution using the last bus metaphor. According to him, the youth of China, the post-90s generation, especially the urban youth, is trying to catch that last bus to upward social mobility. Xiangpiao argues that the last bus has already left and hopelessness has taken over, making the youth feel involuted. This fear of missing the last bus is manifested into behavior which can be seen as bordering normlessness. Being in a market-driven rat race in which the runners, aka the blue-collar and white-collar workers, are bound to lose, seems to have filled the new Takungren, the new working people, with a sense of meaninglessness. In this new slide, we can see the typical scenarios of involution as discussed by the netizens in China. These typical scenarios indicate that the subjects engaged in the normless 996 or 007 work culture are exhibiting powerlessness and self-estrangement. Now, semantically speaking, powerlessness, meaninglessness, normlessness, isolation, and self-estrangement are negative feelings which may describe the anxiety, unhappiness, tiredness of an individual. But when approached through theories of alienation, as Melvin Seaman has talked about it in detail in his paper on the meaning of alienation, we can see that these are the manifestations of alienation. Going further, in order to establish that involution is in fact alienation, it is also imperative that the very disconcerting question, can alienation be found in China, where socialism with Chinese characteristics is practiced, is also addressed. Wang Ruoshui, in his writing titled Discussing the Problem of Alienation, published in 1985, says that in China, ideological alienation, political alienation, and even economic alienation can be found. He points out that even a socialist society can engage in a high-speed pursuit of modernization and economic development. Calling such a rapid development superficial, he argues that in the long run, it will produce greater suffering and liabilities for the people, resulting in their alienation. This prophecy of Wang Ruoshui has been captured in letter and spirit in the works of Jia Changke, an author from the 6th generation. Jia Changke's films, beginning from Xiaoshan Going Home, released in 1996, to Ash is Purest White, released in 2018, are the mimesis of the complicated journey of the protagonists, especially youth, amid the rapid socio-economic changes around them as a result of the journey of China towards economic reforms and market economy. Alienation in the form of isolation, first and foremost, is manifested in Jia Changke's refusal to be a part of what Adorno and Horkheimer have termed the culture industry, which is a product of liberalized economies where filmmaking is business, films are commodities, whose only purpose is to produce more and more capital. It is thus no surprise that his protagonists in Hometown Trilogy 2, existing amid the rapid socioeconomic changes around them, manifest some of all the 5 symptoms of alienation as defined by Seaman. Now, because of paucity of time, I cannot take the audience through all the works which are there in Hometown Trilogy. However, I would quickly take you through the brief summary of Platform, which is one of the seminal works of Jia Changke, which was released in 2000. Platform, set in Fanyang, the hometown of Jia Changke, is a narrative of the desultory wanderings of a group of young people through the period of 1979 to 1989, from the advent of the economic reforms to the June 4th incident, which Jia Changke refers to as the Great Setback. These young people, Cui Mingliang, In Ruijun, Chang Quan, and Chung Ping, who are shown to work in a state-supported cultural troupe, at the beginning of the film, witnessed the launch of the 4 modernization policy, one child policy, the 35th anniversary of the founding of the PRC, and the June 4th incident. Along with these historical socio-political economic changes, they also become witness to advent of privatization, consumerism, commodification, pop culture, and individualism. Their state-supported cultural troupe and the 4 protagonists, just like Han Sanming, a coal mine worker in a recently privatized coal mine, and a cousin of Cui Mingliang, end up, as the Merle Travis song goes, owning their soul to the company store. Alienation in the form of alienation of labor is experienced by the protagonists as they all work now as per the demand of the market. The result being them drifting with a sense of powerlessness and self-estrangement. The film also shows their desire to leave their small town of Fanyang to live in a cosmopolitan city like Guangzhou, but that metaphorical train to take them out of Fanyang never arrives. The film ends with the three characters, Cui Mingliang, In Ruichuan, and Chang Chun with their youth faded, settling down in a quotidian existence in Fanyang, which I argue can also be interpreted as a Sisyphean existence fraught with a sense of meaninglessness. We find this theme of Sisyphean existence and Tantalusian existence throughout the works of Jia Zhangke, again, manifestations of alienation, which in today's context will be understood as, might be understood as involution. Again, I am not going to discuss the other works. However, I will now come to the last part of my paper. As Peter Archibald points out, one of the key characteristics of alienated individuals, as per Karl Marx, is when individuals psychologically react to objective structural conditions which limit their personal development with certain feelings. For example, a lack of well-being, or actions, for example, avoiding labor like the plague. This action can also translate into opting out of the rat race of achieving success as defined and approved by such a structure. It is thus logical that China is also witnessing new social phenomenon of opting out of the rat race around the same time when the issue of the involuted youth is the talk of the town. We are thus presented with a situation where on one hand, a young Chantu Xiu, a young Li Tachao, and a younger Mao Zedong are fighting to change the destiny of China through revolution, through establishing the Chinese Communist Party in the drama series, The Awakening Age. And on the other side, we have songs in Chinese appearing on the internet propagating lying flatism. One of such parody is set to the tune of the International. I hope I can play it for you all.
Yeah, Madhurender, your time is almost up. You please wrap it within a minute. Yeah.
躺平精疲力竭的韭菜，躺平全世界绝望的人，满腔的热血已经冰冷，要为活命而躺平，别努力，且毫无意义，韭菜们躺平躺平，不要说我们一无所有，我们本来就啥也没有。
So the song refers to lying flatism as the new non-cooperation movement and calls upon the tired and hopeless of the world who want to live to just lie down flat. The subtext of the lyrics are reminiscent of the last scene of Chia's platform, in which it is a quotidian afternoon. Cui Mingliang is lying listlessly in a sofa chair in a slumber, his youth worn out by his desultory wanderings and alienation. In today's China, the alienated Cui Mingliang would be seen as an involuted youth who is lying flat. Thus, by comparing the phenomenon of involution and the themes of Jia Zhangke's work, I would like to conclude my paper by saying that the new phenomenon of involution is in fact alienation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhurender. I think we had 4 excellent presentations. Of course, time was a constraint. May I now request Professor Amit Sen to make his remarks as a discussant. Professor Sen, over to you.
Right. Thank you, Professor Deepak, and thank you to all the participants for offering us a glimpse into the contemporary world of China, especially through its cultural nuances. Now, with Subham Dutraj's paper, I was especially taken by the way in which Confucius becomes a way of appropriation of, or rather, Confucius is appropriated as a form of state power. And I was reminded of the works of Michel Foucault, in the way in which, the state appropriates thinkers' personalities to project its own intentions, especially, Hu Jintao's idea to use Confucius as a medium of social harmony, to Xi Jinping's idea of patriarchy obedience. I was just curious to know, because I saw that Dutraj was making this point about ordinary people imbibing the issues of Confucius. I did not find that his paper was discussing this. So maybe, while he develops this in a wider context, he could talk about Confucius in the wider social structure of power. Now, I make this, of course, with a very limited awareness of how exactly Confucius is being used in the contemporary scenario in China. With Shubhendu Ghoshal's paper, I was fascinated to see how, language perennially escapes from the fringes of cultural censorship, and especially popular culture, within which, and popular culture of resistance, that perennially seeks to sort of transgress and radically question the issue of state power. So I was fascinated by the way in which 748 was being used as go to hell, or 23023456789 was used as a place without one. In a certain sense, this becomes a kind of a way in which Shubhendu could explore the creation of dystopic figures through language. We'll remember that 1917-18 in Europe, Orwell and the others were invoking the mode of dystopia to create a sense of new kind of a language. Big Brother is watching, and so on and so forth. So it's interesting in the way in which digits, emojis, visuals are being used with the written word. So that was a paper that fascinated me, although, for the lack of time, we probably could not go deeper into this, but that was a well-done paper. Nishit, of course, presented a of Moy, which actually not the author, but the prize becomes a mode of soft power. So, I was also reminded of course, Rabindranath, whose prize became a kind of a way of announcing the arrival of the Asian onto the world cultural stage. And very interestingly, Moyan, I was just reading through Moyan because I had a curiosity about him, and he talks about the Moyan who has won the Nobel Prize as somebody who is dissociated from the real author Moyan in many ways. And it's interesting in that neither does the party, as it were, invoke within the system, neither do they his work to that extent, because he's seen as somebody who refuses to sort of criticize the state to that extent. So it's interesting in the way there is this question as to what makes a critical writer, or what is the exact boundary which a writer can cross within a state periphery. So I'm very curious to see how you see within a state that has enormous power, the persona or the self of these both inside the state and outside the state. Madhurendra, of course, again provoked me to think.
Good afternoon, Dr. Sun. Can I just interrupt?
In which,
can you switch off your video? Your audio is breaking. At least your audio would be clear.
All right. Okay. So Madhurendra, I was taken very deeply by the ways in which you associated involution and alienation. I was especially reminded of the play Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett, when you referred to the train that never arrives and life that goes on without any real significance, as it were. So in that sense, the ways in which Shashanka actually sort of moves away from the mimesis of the contemporary statey youth towards modernity was a fascinating insight. I was just trying to locate within your paper this idea of the Sisyphean journey, because Sisyphus is also somebody who's marked with a lot of pain. And therefore, I was curious to know whether you would associate involution with a sense of pain in the way that the existentialists would have used it, especially also some time later on, the sociologist Emil Durkheim, who sort of brought in this concept of anomie. So these are my very scanty thoughts. Once again, apologies, because I am somebody who is not familiar with the larger contexts of Chinese literature and culture. But these were my observations on your papers. Congratulations to you once again. And I hope that I will sometime be able to read the fuller papers. Thanks to the chair, Professor Deepak, and to the organizers for letting me have an insight into this fascinating journey through Chinese culture.
Thank you, Professor Sam. I think we still have 20 minutes or so for Q&A session. And I can see there are already some questions posted in the chat box. So maybe I will read them out, and maybe the concerned panelists can answer these questions. So the first question, and I hope all of you will be very, very brief when you are answering these questions, maybe not beyond a minute or two, so that we can come back, to respond to some more questions if there are. The first question is to Shubhendu. Do Chinese netizens dare to discuss political things and criticize government or Chairman Xi Jinping in social media? Shubhendu, very briefly.
I think there are attempts going on. From that, we can see the word which came in. But yeah, the Xi Jinping, Xi Jinping is power, the attempts are easily being taken down within a very seconds of time which is being uploaded. I hope the time changes and things will change. Thank you.
Okay, there is another question. I hope it is to you only. So briefly, you can also answer this. Chinese netizens are finding fun as the praxis to communicate regarding the social political issues. How long can the government shut their voices? What can be the sustainable solution in order to enable a smooth dialogue between the people and the state? Shubhendu, very briefly, you answer this question too.
Yeah, I think this is a very good question. And actually, this needs time. And if you see the Chinese system, Chinese mechanism, doesn't work like that, which are there in democracies. So it is very hard to predict right now when the time will come. And we'll all have to wait for the right time to address this issue. Thank you.
Next question is for Subham Dutraj. Subham, the question to you is, how does the re-emergence of Confucianism tap into the spiritual dimension? Wouldn't Confucianism be more utilitarian than spiritual? Subham, are you there? It appears he is not there, or he's not responding. So let me now go to another question, which is posed to Madhurendra. Is alienation in alignment with globalization? How is China benefiting from the idea of alienation and involution in modern day society? Madhurendra.
Yes, thank you for the question. We see the rise of alienation in China, especially in terms of economic alienation or social alienation being felt by youth after 1979, when economic reforms, liberalization, market economy was introduced in China. So yes, it is related to globalization. However, I don't see, I can't say that it is beneficial for the Chinese society. In fact, lying flatism, which is being seen as a non-cooperation movement or civil disobedience movement, is the result of alienation or involution. And in fact, President Xi Jinping has also talked about it in October, where he says that we must go for policies which decrease the wealth gap, so that phenomena like involution and lying flatism can be discouraged. So that's my brief answer. Thank you.
Madhurendra, there is another question for you. In your text, did you see spiritual elements at all? How do you position spirituality with respect to alienation and involution?
So yes, the spiritual element is there. In fact, with involution, there is a rise of a new type of youth, which again comes under lying flatism, and they are called Zen Y, or the Buddhist youth, who are basically saying that we will not be a part of this materialistic culture. We will barely survive, and it will be interesting if I don't know who has asked this question, but if you can read about the Sanhe gods. I will type it for everyone. Sanhe gods. So this is related to spirituality, the aspect of not hoarding and living in the most minimalistic way. Thank you.
Okay, the next question is for Nishit. I think Nishit has already answered it in the chat box, but still, Nishit, if you would like to further expand it, could you please repeat who translated Moyen's work in Hindi? I think he has already said that it was Professor Pushpet Pant from JNU, and Tanvi Negi, Doon University, has translated. Now, let me, Nishit, would you like to further expand on the question if there are some more translations in India?
No, till now, only these two translations. And so you are the best person to explain more about the translation project going on under you, and Professor Tanvi is also here. Probably she can add on her translation.
Okay, thank you. Shubham, are you there? If you would like to respond to the question.
Yes, sir. Definitely.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, thanks for the question. Actually, there are two trends inside Confucianism. The spiritual aspect of Confucianism is actually a metaphysical. By spiritual, I mean metaphysical, that is the connection of human nature, humankind with the larger cosmos, individual with larger cosmos. This is one part. Other part is utilitarian, which is the logical and ethical, that is application of Confucianism to the governance of a society and society and state, like which by how you govern the society, how you govern the state, that is the second part. That's it, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. There are some more questions. Shubhendu, there is another question for you. What was your process to study these neologisms? What is your opinion in the best way to carry out a study in the Chinese digital landscape?
Okay, to address the question, my method of study was I have been through the Chinese social media platforms and academic journals written by eminent Chinese professor. But
I think, Shubhendu, there is another question related to it, which is asked by Professor Bhim Subha. So it is also about the digital Leninism, So do you see China as a digital Leninism to control model for many countries now?
Okay. So answer the first question. I have been through various journals written by eminent Chinese scholars, and some foreign scholars are also working on this. Johan Lagerwich, Han Rongbin of Cambridge University, they have published journals. But the point is, you'll get the formation of the languages, how it has been created But about the formation of words which are very sensitive in China, you'll hardly get papers of Chinese scholar writing about it in mainland China. So you'll have to go through research journals which are being published by foreigners around the world, especially Stanford University and Cambridge University is doing a great work on this, and their articles are available in JSTOR. And for the coining of the words, finding new words, I have gone through the Chinese social media. I've searched various communities, Chinese online communities, which are regularly updating these words. And to address Professor Subha's comment, China's digital Leninism, I would rather say that the China is right now is going on. It can be said that China's digital Shiism, right? In terms of monitoring, it's since Xi Jinping took power in 9 years back, the censorship in China has increased in folds, not in. And as you said, in other countries about the censorship, yeah, when you see there's a trend going on in countries where we talk about India and other parts of the world, in Russia as well, when some strong leader is coming up, as the leader claimed to be strong, there is an attempt which is going on to suppress the voice, which doesn't conform to their ideas, but things have not yet reached the level of that of China. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have a couple of questions addressed to Madhurendra. Madhurendra, the question is related to your hint at Sisyphean existence with relation to involution of like alienation.
Yes.
As I understand, Sisyphus understands the futility of his action and yet does it. How do you associate it with lying flatism? So to say which, as I understand, is about doing nothing. Do you see a link between the two?
Yes, yes, absolutely. There is a link between the two. And in my paper, I have discussed the Sisyphean existence as well as the Tantalusian existence, which are often discussed when we are discussing alienation. And lying flatism is a direct result of this frustration with the Sisyphean existence as well as Tantalusian existence, where no matter how much efforts you put in, you never get the desired result, and it becomes a painful, and existence becomes a painful experience. So lying flatism is basically not engaging oneself in these kind of Sisyphean or Tantalusian existence. And in Chachanka's films as well, the characters, be it in Unknown Pleasures or Shaoshan Going Home or Xiao Wu, we see that the characters do go through the Sisyphean as well as Tantalusian experience. And in Platform, we see the film ending with the character lying flat. So yes, there is a direct correlation between these phenomena. Thank you.
There is another question related in different context addressed to you, Madhurendra, only. So maybe briefly in 20 to 30 seconds, you can address to that also. The question is, as we all know that China matters a lot to the world and we are keeping eyes on every step it takes, can you talk something on why China is, I think, alienating the world or with the world? Do you think this is going to be beneficial for China in the long run?
This is quite a complicated question, and to be very frank, I don't find myself in the position to comment on it right now. However, it will be suffice.
I mean, from domestic alienation to global alienation.
Yes, it's suffice to say that alienation is never a healthy thing. So China alienating the world or the world alienating China is not a healthy thing for anyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhurendra. I don't think I have any more questions on the screen. Is there any other question the audience would like to pose to any of the speakers? It appears there are no questions, and we still have 6 minutes. So maybe I can maybe have some more remarks since there are 6 long minutes. I think if there are some more questions from the audience, we may entertain 1 or 2. before I conclude.
Sir,
Or
if you
if the
allow,
panelists would like to
yes, sir.
ask questions to each other, so that
Sir,
would also
if you allow, I would like to respond to Professor Amrit Sen's observations on my paper.
Okay, very briefly.
Yes, sir. Sir, first of all, thank you very much for your wonderful observations. Yes, the metaphor about the train that never arrives is inspired from Waiting for Godot, and thank you for pointing that out. And yes, the phenomenon of anomy has also been discussed in my paper, especially in the context of Cha Changke's Unknown Pleasures, which, as Melvin Seaman puts, he calls anomy normlessness. So, of course, we can, in the context of this film, we can use the term, use anomy or normlessness. And in my paper, I have discussed that. So thank you. Thank you, sir.
And any other panelist would like to ask any question to any of you? I think there is one question to Nishit. Nishit, you may answer it briefly. Do you consider Mo Yan as subversive voice? He has been linked with writers like Yu Hua and Fang Fang by Netizen. So do you see him also a subversive voice?
Yes. On this question, I would like to say that it's true. There are a lot of observation which looks at Mo Yan's works as a subversive voice. And in fact, his translators, Howard Goldblatt, comment like, quote, like everyone else writing in China, Mo Yan knows the rule, and the rules are flexible enough that he can write about anything so long as he does not touch the three T's, Tibet, Taiwan, and Tiananmen. So drawing from his views, it can be argued that his writings contain criticism, but as he's living in China and keeping the balance to not be seen as an anti-government, he does do self-censorship sometimes. And for translations, because Howard Goldblatt and Mo Yan both are in conversation when translating, they try to either delete some of the chapters or characters from his works. Yeah, that's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With this, I think it's time for my final remarks. We still have 3 minutes. I think we have had wonderful presentations from all of you, and various aspects of Chinese society, literature, reflecting literature, culture, and the voice of the Netizen was deliberated upon. But I think what is more important, which I perhaps also indicated in my initial remarks, that the domestic churning, so which has been going on in China, especially ever since Xi Jinping has taken the reins of power, it has raised many questions. So it is become a very, very complex thing to understand and maybe to set it straight as far as evaluation or analysis of this journey is concerned. And of course, if we look through the kind of evaluation China is having about their history, which was also one of the themes of sixth plenary session, which was concluded on 11th of this month. This perhaps will also decide the kind of direction Chinese society or various elements, whether Mo Yan's status, his writing, and the kind of cinema, or even the kind of spiritual civilization China is planning to build, will go into certain direction. And it is for this reason why I'm saying that the second resolution of 1981, it provided that safety valve, for researchers, for writers, for intellectuals to criticize what had gone wrong within the Chinese society. So I think that safety valve, which was open there until I would say, 2012 or maybe maximum till 2014, 15. So it is being closed gradually. So this aspect, I think, has to be taken care of, and it is being reflected as was, deliberated by each of you. And maybe that will take your findings in slightly different, direction as the discourse on these things in China, it takes altogether a different shape. So with these words, I thank you all. I thank all the panelists. I thank our discussant, Professor Amit Sen. I also thank the people who raised question or intervened, during Q&A. I could not then, but then most of them I see they were our students, and some of them they are faculty. So we had an excellent session, and I thank you all for making it wonderful. Thank you all. And I think we have closed it at time.
Let me conclude the session by thanking Professor Deepak and Professor Sen for their remarks and comments on the papers, as well as our 4 paper presenters. The video recordings of all our sessions will be available on the ICS YouTube channel. We shall now break for lunch and resume at 2:15 p.m. for a final special panel, which is on media, society, and culture in China. Please note that the meeting room will remain open for the next session. We'll encourage you to stay back with your audios and videos off. Thank you again.